Election day has stretched into election week. And at this hour, it's still unclear which party will control the House or the Senate. In several key races, votes are still being counted. Some of those results could take weeks. That's right, weeks. Currently, Republicans are expected to hold a slim majority in the House. 28 races are still undecided. In the Senate, 3 races are still undecided. And next month, the high-profile Georgia Senate race between Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican Herschel Walker will go to a runoff. That race could end up determining which party controls the Senate. And while there is a lot of uncertainty, what is clear is that the Republican red wave, it simply did not happen. Many of former President Trump's highest profile endorsements ultimately lost their races. That's led some in the GOP to question whether Trump is a drag on the party while still celebrating party wins. Meanwhile, Democrats, including the president, are praising the results.
2 years ago, when I became leader, Republicans had less than 200 seats in the House. That cycle, we picked up 14 seats. Tonight, we built upon those gains 2 years ago, and it is clear that we are going to take the House back.
We lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first elected midterm, at least 40 years. And experts said we couldn't beat the odds, but we did beat the odds.
Joining me to discuss all this and more, Dan Balls, chief correspondent at The Washington Post, Weijia Zhang, senior White House correspondent for CBS News, Jonathan Martin, we call him J-Mart, politics bureau chief at Politico, and Aisha Rasco, host of Weekend Edition Sunday on NPR. Thanks all of you for being here around the table. Love to have everyone here. Dan, you have covered politics longer than all of us, so I'm going to start with you. This was the red wave that was it. The GOP, even if they take back the House, this could be the best midterm election of any president, at least in the last 2 decades. What's your biggest takeaways from what this election tells us and the lessons here?
Well, having covered a lot of these election nights, this was one of the most astonishing, certainly for a midterm, because it defied almost all the elements of history that we use as guides to let us give a sense of where things are going. I think one of the big takeaways is that Donald Trump has created a different electorate in this country. 2018, we had record turnout. In 2020, we had record turnout. And in 2022, we had near record turnout. Normally, the party that holds the White House has trouble getting its voters out in a midterm election like this. But in this case, they came in droves, and it defied the expectations. And so as a result of that, you have the party that may well capture control of the House disappointed and fighting among themselves, and the party that could lose the House quite jubilant that they're as close as they are. The Senate's still up for grabs. It's very possible, maybe even likely at this point, that the Democrats hold that. So it's just a year in which it really was a choice and not a referendum on the party in power.
And Jonathan, J-Mart, there are a number of races that are still not likely to be called, but there's Nevada and Arizona that are those key Senate races. Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking and seeing, both on the House side, but also on the Senate side in terms of where things are heading.
Well, I think we're coming on the air tonight, and your viewers should know that there have just been thousands of votes counted in Nevada, and it looks increasingly like Senator Masto, who's the incumbent Democrat there, is probably going to find a path to re-election. She's only down under 1,000 votes now statewide, and there are still 40,000 more votes to come just from Las Vegas and Reno alone, those metro areas. So she appears to be on track. That's important because if she does close that gap and overtake her GOP challenger, that all but guarantees Democrats will hold the Senate, because Mark Kelly in Arizona is even better shape right now than her. And that would make Georgia, for those watching at home, only relevant as to whether the Dems would have a 1-seat majority or a 0-seat majority, with the VP breaking the tie. So Nevada is the key, and tonight it looks like Masto is going to be able to hold on.
And there's a lot going on the House side, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's fascinating about the House is that there's drama in terms of both sides of the aisle, in terms of who's going to be in charge. Usually after a House election, at least one party, we know who's going to be leading that caucus. It's now uncertain as to whether Speaker Pelosi if Democrats do go into the minority, whether or not she would stay, resign, or perhaps stay and serve in the minority, or perhaps stay and try to serve as minority leader. So she has three options basically that are sort of fascinating to watch. There's intense hope among a lot of younger Democrats in the House that there's going to be a passing of the baton to that next generation, but they weren't expecting this election to be so close. And now Pelosi, I think it's more of an open question as to whether or not she will move on. It's a mess with the House GOP because of the opposite. They had high hopes for this election, and now it seems like if they do have the majority, Amisha, it's only going to be a 3 or 4 seat majority, which is so darn close, and could be even closer than that. And so if that's the case, Kevin McCarthy's going to have a really hard time
I mean, it sounds like
finding
a
the
little bit of a nightmare,
votes,
yeah.
finding the votes to become speaker, because he has critics on the far right of his caucus that are not going to vote for him for speaker. That could create an extraordinary story on the floor of the House in January, because you have to get 218 votes on the floor of the House to be speaker. And if he can't find his entire party unified, those Democrats sure aren't going to bail him out.
No, those Democrats are definitely not going to bail him out. Weija, one of the happiest people I'm seeing this week is on your beat. President Biden is chipper, I think. Tell me what you're hearing at the White House behind closed doors, what they're saying, and what also they think this says about the message that Democrats were putting out there that really was also about democracy and threats, inflation, and abortion. It was sort of a trifecta. Some people saw that as sort of messy, but it worked in some ways.
Right. And it is not in this administration's DNA to gloat and to say, I told you so. But basically, behind the scenes, they're saying, I told you so, because there was so much criticism against their strategy to focus on a variety of issues and not just the economy. In fact, the president's last primetime address was about the threat to democracy. And he made that just a few days before Election Day. And a lot of Republicans said, this shows that he is out of touch because people are really just so stressed about paying their bills that, he's choosing to focus on something that is not what is top of mind for people. But we just saw that's not true. Abortion was a factor. Yes, the economy was a factor. The threat to democracy was a factor. And so that is what we heard from the White House from the very beginning, that they were going to focus on these issues and on the president's accomplishments because they wanted this to be a policy-driven campaign, not a personality-driven campaign, which is why the president did not do a lot of the big campaign rallies that previous presidents had done until the very end, when he wanted to make sure to drum up enthusiasm to get people out to vote. And to Jonathan's point, the other reason why he's very happy is even though Republicans look like they're poised to take over, the White House feels that there's enough wiggle room, there's enough fractures within the party that they will still be able to accomplish things on his agenda. It's going to be tough, they acknowledge that, but they are certainly much more optimistic than they would have been if that so-called red wave had happened.
Yeah, and Aisha, we just talking about sort of personality not being at the forefront there, and I think that's very much true, and that's what I'm hearing from my sources. But there's also this idea that candidates do matter in some ways. How much did candidate quality matter when you look at these election results, especially even in a place like Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman bested out Dr. Oz, who was this Trump-backed candidate that some just saw as simply unqualified?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I think this election was a real test of whether races had been nationalized to the point and whether the electorate was so polarized that basically if you had an R and you were a Republican, they would vote for you. If you were a Democrat, they would vote for you. I think what this shows is it matters who you are, because you saw those split tickets. You saw in Georgia where you had Governor Kemp get reelected, right? But then you have Herschel Walker. There were people that voted for Kemp. They did not vote for Walker, right? They did not. And then you see in Pennsylvania where you had Oz, you had someone where, Trump put that thumb on the scale and you got Oz, but people didn't glean to him. People felt like he was a carpetbagger. He was kind of a snake oil salesman. That's what people felt. I'm not saying that's who he is, but that's the way people felt. And that's what happened when it came to, and you saw the results of that. And it really hurt the Republicans.
Certainly. And Dan, you're also hearing some in the GOP say now out loud their criticisms of Trump. Some of the things that people would only say on background are now somehow materializing on national news. And for me, it strikes me that the Capitol attack, you saw people run from Trump and run right back. I wonder how much you think people are going to run from Trump and run right back, or if this is really a real sort of test of, and a real sort of example of people saying, you know, this is the limit for us.
It may be an inflection point for Donald Trump. We've said that a lot of times over the last 6 years, and I would say almost every time we've been proven wrong. So I don't want to go too far out on that limb, but there is something materially different about this. I think after 2020 and after the attack on the Capitol, despite the attack on the Capitol, I think Republicans felt that they could not win, and they could not win this year, without Trump being in the tent and part of it, that they needed his voters. But in getting those voters, they also got Donald Trump meddling in these elections. And to look at the Senate, you could argue that had they had different candidates in Georgia and in Pennsylvania, they would have won those two races, and in which case they would have the Senate. So I think that the issue now is, will they conclude from this that instead of thinking they can't win without Trump, that now they can't win with him?
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's because for the past 2 years, the open-ended question that we've talked about so much is, what power does Trump still have within the GOP? And I think a lot of candidates were concerned that remained a lot of power. And now they see the results, and that is just not the case, because those candidates who he endorsed actually underperformed. On the flip side, you know, the president was trying to avoid areas where there were really tight races, President Biden, that is, and it turns out that the places where he did go, those candidates overperformed. And so you're right, Dan. I think now the question, it was always how much can Trump still help a candidate? Now it's how much can he hurt them?
Yeah.